93, 93, 93. This is Amon Asha Renew from AshaRenew.com. We will get started in just a second. Let me just put on the background music as usual, and we will get started. '93, Mary, '93, Joshua, '93, '93, '93. All right, so this time, let me turn this down slightly. Hold on. Turn it down just slightly. All right. What's up, Sharice? Peace, peace, peace. Much love to you, Queen. Much love, much love. All right, so today we're going to speak on how to actually utilize the tarot here, because I haven't really been going too deep into the tarot for whatever reason. I don't even have a reason for it. I'm like, oh, why haven't I been using the tarot? So I guess it's a time to use it, I guess. All right. But the goal here is you are the tarot. So that's where this is how I want to start this off. You are the tarot anyway. So the tarot deck is just for you to memorize, so you can activate it within. What's up, Immortal 7293? So this is how we're going to start it. Meaning, once you have memorized all 78 dimensions of the tarot, you no longer need a tarot deck, because you can perform a tarot reading from within your own consciousness. So that's really how we're going to start it off, because ain't nobody talking about it from that perspective. I already know that. So I'm not going to be the person to tell you, okay, you need to utilize a tarot deck. You really don't. If you have one, good. But the only purpose is to memorize the attributes of the tarot. Because we have so many people just using tarot for fortune telling, which is its lowest form. Meaning you have people utilizing tarot to see, if their boyfriend is cheating, if their girlfriend is up to no good. We have people utilizing tarot for these reasons. And I guess you could utilize it for those reasons. But that's not necessarily how I utilize the tarot. I'm not trying to find out what the fuck is going on behind closed doors for anybody. That's not necessarily what I'm into. But I guess for the people that are into that, I guess you could use that, but you're not utilizing it to its fullest potential. The fullest potential of the tarot has nothing to do with what's going on with anyone else, because it helps you to explore the dimensions of your own consciousness. That's the goal. The goal is exploring the dimensions of your own consciousness, not what someone else is doing or not doing. Because when you do it like that, like, okay, if this is exploring my own consciousness, you don't need a deck. if you already know each attribute. You can just call out the name from your mental plane. What tarot card should be utilized? All you gotta do is think of the card because it's already within you. And you're gonna get a reaction. But before we go into all that, let me actually grab a physical tarot deck and I'm gonna actually pull a card. And essentially what I will ask is, what will be the best way to commit the tarot to memory? I remember you using playing cards to do a tarot reading. Exactly. The only reason that's possible is because each card already has attributes. So when you're using playing cards, all it does is take away the imagery. So that's the whole essence of it. You don't need the imagery. See, people rely too much on the imagery of the tarot. Once you remove that imagery, you see most people probably couldn't give you a tarot reading. They need that imagery. This is why I'm recommending, if you know the attributes, you don't need the imagery. You can use a regular playing card deck. If you don't even want to get a tarot deck, if you want to be mysterious about what you're doing, just utilize a regular playing card deck. You can do that. That is very possible. But you must already know the attributes of the cards, because it's not going to give you any insight as to what the cards mean. You have to already know what it means. So that's the difference. So to me, that's actually a better way, because you don't get fixated on the imagery. Because depending on what tarot deck you have, the imagery will be different. So anytime you change a tarot deck, you're dealing with different imagery, but the attributes should remain the same, to the point where you become universal. So it don't matter what deck you use, because you already have it committed to heart. So for example, with the 2 of disc or the 2 of coins, if that doesn't make any sense to you, meaning if I say the 2 of disc and nothing comes to you, like, okay, well, what does the 2 of disc mean? If you have to rely on the imagery, then you don't know the attributes. Because if we're dealing with the 2 of disc, we're dealing with the energy of Capricorn being influenced by Jupiter. So that would be the first decan of Capricorn. So every card has attributes which don't require any imagery. I prefer playing cards. Exactly. It's actually a lot easier because it's more mysterious. You can just pull out playing cards. Ain't nobody gonna raise an eye. Nobody will know what you're doing at all. And playing cards you can get from any damn gas station. So it's like, it's very inexpensive. It's only a couple dollars. So yeah, anybody has access to playing cards. But again, this is how the playing cards started. Before we were actually playing games with these cards, these were tarot cards utilized for spiritual purposes. But again, as time went on, it became lost and diluted, and that's why when we think about tarot now, we think about witches, we think about people doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing, dealing with things that they probably should not be concerned with at all. This is what it has been downgraded to, but we're here today to bring it back to its highest apex. Because that should be the goal anyway. Because that's what puts you in a whole different level, a whole different lane than everybody else. If you got a room full of people that pulls out a tarot deck, and you pull out playing cards, and they look at you crazy, that's because they're not on their game. That's just how it really gets. In a room full of tarot readers, if you're the one with the playing card deck, that means you're the most advanced, because you don't need to rely on any imagery or attributes, because you have it all committed to memory. So you become the most advanced because you have it committed to your memory versus relying on a tarot deck. So you see, that puts you in a whole different lane, because you become the tarot. The tarot is not something you utilize. The tarot is something you become, which is the actual goal. The tarot is how we explore the various dimensions of our consciousness. So if your consciousness are attributes you already possess, we all possess the 360 degrees of the zodiac. So that means we all have the tarot within us. If you acknowledge astrology, if you acknowledge your natal chart, that means you have all 360 degrees that you can access in your own natal chart, which has nothing to do with anyone else. Because those were the energies that you came into this planet bearing. No one else was there. Pretty much no one else was there in the room when you were being born, unless you have a twin, but even the twin wasn't born at the same time. Two people didn't come out exactly at the same time. So whatever energy we download into our consciousness is energies we have to utilize and we have to master. So the natal chart gives you those 22 points of focus so that you can understand how your energy is dispensed. And once you understand how your energy is dispensed, now you understand how you relate to other people, because you know how you relate to yourself via your own consciousness. You know how to activate your own consciousness. So whatever else other people are doing, you're already vibing. Because your consciousness is stimulated because you know how to utilize your words of power. You know how to utilize your occult language. And nobody knows anything. It ain't something you got to talk about. It ain't something you got to make known to nobody. This is something that you can do completely internally, which is the goal. You can use nothing but your mental force. Going back to the first universal law, the law of mentalism, everything is mental. So if everything is mental, that means everything is contained within your own consciousness. And if everything is contained within your own consciousness, the tools are just there to be memorized, not to be relied on. So I guess that's why I don't really dig into too much tarot nowadays. That's not how I started. But nowadays, yeah, I don't really be picking up a tarot deck unless someone asks me for a tarot reading. But I don't really pick up the tarot deck as often as I used to, because I just know the attributes. The attributes just come to me directly. Peace. What's up, Maxie? So with that, let me go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and we're going to see what comes up so that we can see what would be the best way to utilize. So we're going to go directly to the tarot, so it's not just my opinion. We're going to utilize the tarot as well, so give me a second. And I'm going to shuffle up these cards. All right, the tarot deck is ready. And before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone that when it comes to the tarot represents a wheel. Tarot means wheel. If we're dealing with a wheel, we're dealing with cycles. We're dealing with ages. We're dealing with degrees. 360 of those degrees. So if tarot represents a wheel, and it represents a wheel with 360 degrees, And we understand that that represents the way consciousness is separated. And we call these houses in astrology. The houses just represent how the consciousness is separated and organized. What's up, Khalifa? So for anyone who may have trouble memorizing the tarot in terms of the actual attributes, because this is how you make it come to life anyway. This goes for any of the occult language. Again, it's one thing to have notes. It's one thing to have a tarot deck. It's one thing to have these physical tools. It's another thing to where you put the physical tools down and you start to activate your consciousness. But that requires you to have these things memorized. So honestly, the most magical or powerful thing you can do is commit these things to memory so that you can access them when you need them. You can't access the tarot if you need to pick up a tarot deck. Not in real time. In order to access the tarot in real time, you realize that, oh, these are my 360 degrees that are already contained within my consciousness. There's no need for a deck. But let's get into it. Let's flip over this one card. The card that comes up is the Five of Wands. Now, of course, the Five of Wands is going to be different imagery. The imagery will be different depending on what deck you have. But the attributes should be the same. And the attributes of the Five of Wands is Leo, being influenced by the planetary energy of Saturn. So this brings a fusion of Leo and Saturn, the Five of Wands. If we deal with the five takes us to Geburah. On the Tree of Life, it takes us to the world of Geburah, which is the world of fury, dealing with the essence of Mars, dealing with the essence of discipline, dealing with the elements of chaos, dealing with the elements of severity. When we're dealing with the Suit of Wands, we're dealing with the world of fire, called the archetypal plane. So we are within the archetypal plane because we are within the Suit of Wands, and we are within the world of Geburah. So we are in the world, let me say it correctly, we are in the world of Absolute, within the Sephra of Geburah. In the world of Absolute, in the Sephra of Geburah. Leo takes us to the 5th house, which is a house of pleasure, entertainment, romance, creativity, children, fun, school. Then we're dealing with the planetary energy of Saturn, which represents discipline, government, marriage, big business, corporations, being on the world stage, your world status, the status quo, your interactions with the public interactions. Saturn helps us to mature. That's why Saturn can be kind of harsh, like the energy of a father, giving out discipline. So Saturn is one of the malefic planets. Just like Mars will be considered a malefic planet. Because Geburah is one of the openings to the Qliphoth. The other opening would be Thoth. So you can access the Qliphoth either through Thoth or Geburah, which is the energy of the number 5. Which takes us to severity, So the 5 takes us to severity. Saturn takes us through harshness. And then Leo makes this all, you can say, pleasurable. Now you can say, well, how does any of that make sense? Because all we gotta do is analyze the attributes of Leo, because Leo takes us to the tarot card of lust. In some tarot decks it's called strength. In other tarot decks it's called lust. So Leo takes us to the attribute of lust, while Saturn takes us to the attribute of the world card or the universe card, depending on what tarot deck. It's either the world or the universe. So what this causes is universal lust or universal strength. And that's why the 5 of Wands is considered strife. It is considered a malefic energy because it's dealing with the energies of Mars and Saturn, which are considered malefic. They're only considered malefic because, again, they're harsh, they're severe, but they are absolutely necessary. So you have 2 energies combining together that are considered basically demonic. If we don't want to use the term malefic, just another way of saying demonic. And that's why I said Geberah gains you access to the Qliphothic, aka the demonic world, aka the tree of death, which for the average person would produce strife because they're not trying to open up those worlds. So don't be fooled because a card may say strife or something else negative, or the imagery may depict a negative situation. That's only for those who are trying to, you can say, be overly positive. Anyone who does not want to accept the negative current, it produces strife for them. But anyone who is universal, which is the essence of Saturn, Saturn makes us universal. So that means you have access to the tree of life and the tree of death, the Kabbalah and the Qliphothic. So the 5 of Wands is opening up those Qliphothic planes. Like, okay, if you really are universal, come into hell. Descend into the hellish fires of Mars. But remain disciplined. Remain steadfast. Utilize your endurance. Those are the attributes of Saturn. Use this to mature yourself, to give you a better understanding of these forces instead of trying to avoid the forces. So that's why every tarot deck, you can say, has so-called negative cards, but these cards are only negative if you look at it that way. The so-called negative cards are just cards that give you access to the Qliphothic, which for the average person is demonic, so they don't want no parts of that. So that's why it's considered negative. It's not because the energy itself is negative, or the energy itself is negative because it is feminine, it's dealing with the currency of death. But that doesn't have to be something that you are afraid of, that you fear. When you understand this also represents dimensions of your consciousness that are not explored yet, that we consider the unconscious mind, the collective unconscious. These are the untapped potentials of the mental, of the consciousness. That's why these energies are contained within the Qliphothic in the first place. This represents your untapped potential, energies that you are not necessarily comfortable with, but that are a part of you. Energies that are a part of you, but you are not necessarily comfortable with. That's why it gives you strife. That's why the 5 of Wands represents strife, because it gives you strife because you are unfamiliar with these currents that are a part of you. That's why it's called knowledge of self. That means knowledge of the light and dark. You can't say you have knowledge of self if you only have knowledge of the light. You must have knowledge of the Qliphothic as well. And that's why the negative cards of the tarot introduces you into the Qliphothic, because it is absolutely necessary that you know and understand both sides. But I guarantee that's not how most people read the tarot. When a negative card comes up, They look at it as a negative situation or some type of hardship. They're not going to tell you anything about the clip off. Like, okay, this is just the dimensions of your consciousness that you are unaware of, that you need to become more aware of. So in this case of Leo, if Leo represents lust, and lust is connected to your sexual expression, then we combine this with the energy of Saturn, which represents maturity. What this is saying is your sexual maturity is obtained or accomplished within the realms of the clip off. Well, you can say, well, how does that make sense? Well, in the clip off is where we find all those Lilith type beings, all those vampires, all those succubus, all those incubus, all these so-called negative currents that people try to avoid. However, if you have an understanding of these energies, you realize, oh, this is actually how I achieve sexual maturity. It's not obtained by me denying my darkness or my Qliphothic forces. It comes from me understanding my Qliphothic forces, and that's what helps me to mature. And how do you know this? Because it's the same thing with anything Qliphothic. Anybody who is engaging in any Qliphothic activity, it matures them. It speeds up or it quickens their evolution. Again, that's how you can have a very young person that's very mature, if they have opened up the clip off, or it was forced upon them, depending on, again, I don't want to say force. We all have a script that we play out. So even if it appears to be forced, it's still a script that needs to be played out. Everybody has a script or a fate or a destiny that needs to be played out. So whatever events that transpire in our lives is to set in motion certain dimensions of your consciousness, to awaken certain dimensions of your consciousness. So when a person, for example, goes through a heartbreak, which is considered Qliphothic, what's up, Oshun? It matures you at the end of it all. To have a broken heart and to heal that broken heart is a sign of maturity when you're able to love again. Starting off with yourself, you're able to love yourself again and then begin to love other people again. That's a Qliphothic maturity, because that maturity was very painful. It contained strife. It wasn't fun, it wasn't easy, but it was absolutely necessary. And that's for any negative experience. Any attribute of life that's considered Qliphothic is absolutely necessary, because a Qliphoth is the first creation. For those who may not understand that, the Qliphoth was created first. The tree of death was created first. The Qliphoth was considered a mistake by the so-called God, the creator God. So the first creation was a mistake, and this is coming from the Hebrew perspective. So the first creation was a mistake, and that's where all the so-called demonic forces come from, all the so-called demons come from. That is the first creation. That's why it says the dark is older than the light, because the dark was created first. The tree of death was created first. That's why the Qliphoth is defined as shells. The Qliphoth is defined as shells or a husk, which are like empty shells. Shells, husk, empty shells. However, these teachings are mostly secret. You're not going to really speak to like a Jewish rabbi and he break these things down to you, even if they know. So it's not that people don't know these things. It just, the people that do know, they don't speak on it. I'm just the one speaking on these things. So this is not something that if you study that you don't know. It's just not being spoken about publicly. Just only secretly. So the fact that the card that came up takes us directly into the clip off, that's essentially like, okay, well, I guess the clip off is a topic that needs to be understood. If you understand it as the first creation, the mistake, the so-called mistake, then the correction came with the tree of life. So that was the second creation. We can equate this to the creations of Lilith and Eve. You can say Eve, which is the second wife of Adam, that represents the tree of life, versus Lilith would then represent the tree of death, the first wife. That's why you find Lilith in the clip off. Her name is in the clip off. Even though you don't find Eve's name in the Kabbalah, but Lilith's name is in the clip off. That's the first deity or spirit you meet when you descend into the clip off. You meet Lilith, which is the opposite side of Malkuth. So you can say she is the root of the clip off. She is the root chakra of the clip off. She is the foundation of the clip off. So the Five of Wands, again, is dealing with Leo. So Leo, again, takes us to pleasure, which is what Lilith is all about. So when you combine that with the essence of Saturn, or the universe card, it represents the idea of universal pleasure. Universal pleasure represents being able to access the clip off for pleasurable experiences instead of something that causes strife, because every tarot card has two sides. So just because a tarot card may appear to be negative on the surface, any of the tarot cards have two poles. Each tarot card has two poles. So that means they explain it like, for people that use reverse cards, some people use reverse cards in the tarot. So if the card is inverted, that means it's negative. If the card is upside right, that means it's positive. So some people use a tarot in that way. So that's how you know any card could be positive and any card can be negative. In my particular case, I don't use inverted cards. All cards are upright. However, there are people that utilize it that way. It's not about right or wrong, it's just about your preference. But this goes to the fact that every card is dualistic. So even if we're looking at the surface of a card and it looks negative or feminine, it doesn't mean that that's the only charge it has. That's just what you see. Can you peel back the layers within your consciousness to see it holistically? Because when you're able to see it holistically, you don't have a preference between the tree of life and the tree of death. You understand that they both are necessary. So you're not the person shunning the tree of death in preference of the tree of life. You understand that both energies require you to access, because your consciousness is the tree of life and the tree of death. Your consciousness is not just the tree of life and not the tree of death, because the tree of death, once again, represents the first creation. That means this is your primitive self. This represents your alter ego. This represents your unconscious mind. All those attributes are contained within the clip off. Everything that you don't want to know about yourself, everything that you hate about yourself and everybody else, all that is clip-offic. All that is so-called negative, all that is so-called feminine. And this is why the feminine force is more powerful than the masculine. Because the feminine takes us to the clip off. So all the people that say like women are crazy, we've been hearing that forever, right? Is because they are connected to the clip off because of the feminine current. But that doesn't necessarily make a person crazy. It just makes them clip-offic. It's two different definitions of that. So instead of saying women are crazy, it just means women are clip-offic in their nature, which doesn't mean that it's bad, especially if you embrace Lilith. So that actually would make it good. But it all depends on your perspective. And that's the glory of having a consciousness. You can decide for yourself what it means. So just because, once again, something is negative on the surface, it doesn't mean that it applies to you in that manner. It may be trying to take you to the positive attribute of the negativity, of the negative current. So that's why I say, yeah, if anybody else, I'm not going to say anybody else. Most people, if they would have pulled a negative card, they would have considered it a negative experience. Or you're going to deal with some type of strife today. Oh, this is going to be a challenging day. You see, you can come to those conclusions if we are not careful. This is what it means to be universal. To be universal means you have access to both of these worlds. Night sky reminds me of the feminine because the night sky takes you to Nuit, which is the sky goddess or the sky mother. So the night sky is feminine. That's the first chapter of the book of the law talks about Nuit, which is the star mother. So that's absolutely accurate. Chicago blood sacrifice. So what does that have to do with anything we're speaking about? Unless you're referring to that as why Chicago has a death culture. If you're moving in that direction. But yes, Chicago is, you can say, one of the Qliphothic points of the world. It has always been that way. It's not just because of the drill music. Remember, even in the early days of Prohibition in the 20s, you had the mobsters out there. You had the Italian mob, so on and so forth. So Chicago has always been rooted in the Qliphoth. You can say the whole time. You can say the same thing about California. You can even say the same thing about New York. You can say the same. You can say about these major cities. You can say it. Any of these cities that look like they're just out of control, the Baltimores of the world, right? But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's bad if you're listening to the government. But you're like, oh, this actually creates balance. This is how the world becomes balanced. Instead of we thinking or us thinking that this is what separates us. Definitely, yes, of course. Philadelphia is another one. Yes. Any of these cities that's just off the chain. The Detroits, the Chicagos, the Phillies, the Baltimores. You can say these are Qliphothic cities. These cities thrive on the currency of death. These are the children of Lilith versus the children of Eve. And these are the places, you can say, which birthed hip-hop. Especially Philadelphia. Philadelphia is actually responsible for the graffiti. Graffiti blew up in New York, but it was started in Philadelphia, if we know the history. So that takes us directly into hip-hop. So hip-hop has something to do with this. Haiti too. Well, I just wanted to keep it contained within North America. But yes, if we go outside of North America, yes, Haiti would be one. Jamaica would be another one. Iraq is another one. You can even say Korea. It's like you can, yes, there's all type of spots all around the world. I'm not going to deny that. With places that's just turned up. And basically in current times, I was about to say Iran or Iraq, but even more than that, Ukraine. You can say the most Qliphothic point right now is Ukraine. Because of what's popping off in Ukraine. You can say the Qliphothic forces are activated. Because it is absolutely necessary. And the reason I say it's absolutely necessary because everybody knew what Putin would do if we expanded NATO. So that's not a coincidence that he invaded Ukraine. He said he would. Like, okay, if y'all begin to extend NATO on the borders of Russia, we're going to have something to say about that. So we already knew what we was getting ourselves into. That's why it's all about NATO, expanding NATO. We need more countries in NATO, which is nuclear weapons. If you are a part of NATO, if Russia attacks you, then now NATO has the ability to use its full force of all its countries and just demolish. So essentially, Ukraine is where the Qliphothic energies are being summoned, because they're trying to take Russia out of the picture. They're trying to take Putin out of the picture because he's the one standing in the way, you can say, of Eastern dominance. You can say we have Western dominance, but we need that Eastern dominance. What's standing in the way of Eastern dominance is Russia. And then Russia is connected to China, which is then connected to the Middle East, which is then connected to Africa, because China has invested a lot of money into Africa. So China has some strongholds in Africa as well. So everybody's making their plays as to what side they're going to choose. You're either going to be on NATO's side, or you can say on Russia's side / China's side. So this is just another way of explaining the current events. And you see, I didn't have to read the news to figure that out. I didn't have to listen to nobody else's commentary to figure that out. I was able to figure that out because the attributes are already known. All I did is pull a tarot card. And this is what I mean by the tarot is within you. We bring the tarot to life with our own consciousness, so we can come to original conclusions. Ain't nobody else saying, okay, well, what's going on in Ukraine is the manifestation of Qliphothic forces that's trying to take Putin off the map. But will they be successful? That's going to be up to them. Because Russia is kind of just playing around right now. Russia has the ability to destroy some shit that we have never seen before. So that's why everybody's just kind of playing with Russia. And Russia's kind of playing with Ukraine. Like, Russia ain't in full-fledged war mode. We're just going to flatten everything, kill everything. Russia is not trying to kill everything, trying to flatten everything, like it would be in an actual war. So they're just kind of, just doing little things. But they're capable of so much more, but they're not taking it to that level. But they're being, you can say, when I say they, I mean Russia. Like, Russia's being pushed to utilize it because of what we're doing. Because we're expanding NATO and we're trying to power up on Russia, and Russia will have something to say about it. And that's just what's going on. We would not be in this situation if they were not trying to expand NATO on the borders of Russia. We would not be in this situation right now. We would not be in this situation if they didn't have biolabs in Ukraine creating diseases. Now they're talking about monkeypox. Talking about it's going to be 1 million cases of monkeypox by the fall. This is what I've been reading in the headlines. So now, after it's not even that we got over COVID, because hundreds of people are still dying from COVID every day. They just don't report on it. That's all they do. They just don't report on the death. Hundreds of people are still dying every day from COVID. That means people are still being affected, whether they have vaccines or not. People are still leaving. It's just not as crazy as it was, but it's still hundreds of people a day. So when they speak about monkeypox, which is supposed to be a sexually transmitted disease. So they started with COVID, which made it hard for you to breathe. Now we're going to monkeypox, which is supposed to be transmitted sexually. So what does that tell you? All of a sudden, we just have this pandemic or epidemic after pandemic after epidemic on top of all this inflation that's occurring. So not only are people dealing with inflation, not only do people have to come out with hundreds of more dollars, probably thousands of more dollars, depending on your lifestyle. Now you're spending all this extra money. Now you have to tap into your savings. Now all this extra money is being spent doing the same thing. You're spending more money, getting the same results. And it's being blamed on what's going on in Ukraine. Meaning they're blaming it on the Qliphoth. Let's just put it into proper context. Everything that is so-called going on with the world, because they say the world is dealing with inflation. It's not just America. The world is dealing with inflation. That means everything gets kicking off, according to them, because of what's going on in Ukraine. So you tell me if that's not the Qliphoth or not the Qliphoth on Earth. But they're trying to make it about Putin. They're trying to make Putin, you can say, the devil. They're trying to make Putin a bad guy, but Putin wasn't the one expanding NATO. What threat did Russia have to us? Russia was not threatening the US or any other place. Russia didn't become a threat until we decided to try to put on the big pants and control shit. And Russia just is not having it. You're not going to put biolabs on our territory and release a fucking virus to kill off our people. Because why else would you have biolabs in Ukraine? What do you think they're doing with these biolabs? They're creating diseases which are going to be harmful to the masses. So not only are they talking about monkeypox, they're also talking about they already have vaccines for the monkeypox because they said they were already preparing for this. What are the fucking odds? What are the odds that we're about to go into another epidemic or pandemic with monkeypox and they already got the vaccines that they said that they laid down years ago? They already was preparing for this years ago, but somehow it manifests. How the fuck have you been preparing for years for something and not say shit to the public about it? And it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're still like just we're taking our time calling it a pandemic or an epidemic because we fear that the people are not going to take it seriously because of what happened with COVID and how crazy that was. Going from wearing masks to not wearing masks. Now it's required for you to get a vaccine for you to survive. Like all of the kerfuffle of COVID. That's why they're taking their time with this monkeypox. Like you can't keep people in the house over a sexually transmitted disease. Right? So you see, now they're attacking your sexuality, which is what I've been speaking about. That's why I've been speaking about these things so much. That's why I be speaking about the tantra or the tantric lifestyle so much. Because now they're going after your sexuality. So if you out here having casual sex, basically they're putting the seeds in your consciousness that you may actually catch something. They did the same thing with the HIV and the AIDS, which we knew was also created in a lab. Because how the fuck does this? How does a new disease manifest in the 20th century? Like, what were people doing in the 20th century that they have not been doing for the entire time of the planet Earth? That makes no fucking sense. So you telling me for fucking millions of years, however long this earth has been here, people have been fucking, having children. And all of a sudden in the fucking 20th century, this new disease occurs. And guess who was heading that? None other than Anthony Fauci or Dr. Fauci. He was in control of that. Somehow this same man is in control of COVID. We don't see the connections here. How the fuck is Dr. Fauci? He was the head doctor. I don't want to say doctor. He was the head disease person. You know, the person you go to get the direction from. He controlled AIDS, and he's also controlling COVID. This is the same fucking person. Diseases that have been created in laboratories. How do we know they were created in laboratories? Because it's not naturally occurring. What the fuck were people doing in the 80s? But that's another thing. They've been saying that it's been connected to like gay sex. That's another thing I've been kind of hearing. Like they kind of, they're not really making that super known, but they're saying like this whole monkeypox shit is starting with gay men. They were saying the same thing about HIV and AIDS. It started in the gay community. Now they're saying the monkeypox is started in the gay community. They're saying the same thing. And it's the same people dealing with the response. And nobody finds this odd. For one, what the fuck does a monkey have to do with anything? How the fuck do you have a sexually transmitted disease called monkeypox? How is that possible if people are just having regular sex? How the fuck do you develop monkeypox from a natural experience? And all of a sudden this shit is just popping up in the 21st century? Like people ain't been fucking the whole time. But now all of a sudden these diseases are coming up in the 20th and the 21st century. Like we're doing something different. Like gay people haven't been around forever. They've been doing what they've been doing forever. So why wasn't it developed back then? You can say in Greek time. Why don't we go back to Greece? Where the fuck was the HIV back there? When they was doing what they was doing in Greece. When they was doing what they was doing in Rome. We can take it to any of these cultures. But there was no diseases then. And people probably was more wild back then because they didn't even have condoms back then. So just imagine that. They wasn't even dealing with condoms back then. But somehow, once we make it to the 20th century, now everybody has access to condoms, and we thinking, oh, now this is what you use to have safe sex. So how the fuck is monkeypox being developed? You see, because most people don't have the necessary mind or mental force to decode these things. That's why we just go along with it and like the shit makes sense. It makes no fucking sense. But because we're not the smartest people on the planet, it just goes right over our head. So we just allow this shit to happen, and then everybody follows after America. And that's how the bullshit happens. Everybody's following behind America, and America is causing the clip off to rise. So they're doing it with war or disease. So they're controlling your sexuality with disease. Then they're controlling your interactions with other people through COVID. They're controlling your sexuality through monkeypox. And now they're controlling your pockets through a fabricated war that didn't need to happen at all. We didn't have to be in this situation at all. If we just kept it player, which is they said that's what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump was over there with Putin cooling. As soon as the next president come in, now we at war. But with the previous president was just over there cooling with Putin like shit was cool. Like, all right, we ain't dealing with none of that. As soon as the next president come, now we at war. Now we're sending American troops over to Poland and shit. Now people over here is fighting for what's going on over there. And just the last presidency, none of this shit was going on. Now all of a sudden, because they have an agenda, this is the agenda. They need NATO to occur. They need a war to occur because that's how they can control what we call inflation, what we call diseases, pandemics, epidemics. They're putting all these things in front of us. And we're just sitting around looking stupid. Like we don't understand what's going on. Well, it's hard to understand because of the language they use. It's the language they use. If you don't speak the lingo, it's like it goes over your head. This is why I put so much emphasis on committing things to memory. That's how you begin to understand things that are supposed to be over your head. So you can decode it in real time if you have it in your memory. That's how that works. If you're listening to Dr. Fauci or any infectious disease expert, and you have the tarot contained within you, you have the occult language contained within you, you know every time they speak, you know how to like, oh, that's a lie. Like, oh yeah, that's bullshit. Like, oh, I see what. So you can decode that easily and instantly because you have the keys within yourself. You have the 36 keys within yourself. The 36 deacons is already within you. So all these things that's going on, you don't fall for the illusion because it's damn sure an illusion occurring. Because if people are able or not able, if people are afraid to be around other people and people are afraid to sexually engage with others, that slows down the world's currency. Especially over here in the West. I'm not really speaking about over in the East, especially over here in the West. You can say we are the most casual people of the world. Let's just be honest about this. Because our culture isn't based in anything legit. What I mean by that is you can't really describe the American culture other than what? Fast food, When we think about American culture, we think about fucking McDonald's. We think about Starbucks. We think about poison. We don't think about what America is doing positive for the world. I don't even know what the fuck that is. But we damn sure is putting out poison into this world. We damn sure make sure to fund our wars from these impoverished cities. We make sure to push drugs in these communities that kills off the people, that destroys the people. We make sure to do that, though. Every time there's a war, there's an abundance of drugs, which makes an abundance of mental illness, which makes the people so-called crazy or mad or Qliphothic. That's why we see so much madness happening over here, due to what's going on over there. Because we are naturally connected, so we wonder why there's so many school shootings. We wonder why people are being shot in masses. Every day I read the news, there's always a mass shooting or some shit. A large group of people being hurt. Why is all this occurring? Because of what's going on over there in Ukraine. Because we are responsible for it. So this is the karma that we have to deal with. Now our city's got to be enraged. Police fighting civilians with tear gas and all type of shit. Then it's this story going around with this black man who got shot 60 times by cops, who was unarmed. So they said somebody who was unarmed, who was not a threat to anyone, ends up getting shot 60 times. The only other time I've heard somebody being shot 60 times was KTS, not KTS, Dre. Or is it KTS Dre? It's one of them because it was two of them. Oh, yes, KTS, because it was KTS Vaughn and KTS Dre. When KTS Dre was released from prison, he got shot like 64 times. He didn't even make it home. It's the last time I've heard about somebody being shot over 60 times. So, like, why does it seem like things are just turning up extra crazy right now? Because of what we're doing. This is our fault. And when I say our, this is America. We're doing this to ourselves because we choose to be ignorant about what's really occurring. We choose to close our eyes and just continue to live our lives. That's really what it all comes down to. As long as you can keep your rent paid, as long as you can keep your children fed, you ain't really thinking about it. And that's just the majority of the mentality. As long as the people that they care about are okay, then we're not really thinking about all these other things. But all these other things are causing a chain reaction. And that's what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with the chain reactions of our own karma. Because our intentions are not good. Because we would not be in this situation where damn near World War III is about to break out. And over what? We about to have a whole World War III because we wanted to put some fucking biolabs in Ukraine and we wanted to expand NATO, trying to get Putin out the picture. Trying to do all these power plays, and look at how many people are dying because of it. Because somebody want to make a power play. Somebody's looking to dominate the world. America just wants to be the head honcho. Just want to any way that America can be on top. They're gonna lie, cheat, and steal for it. This is how the country was created. So that's how we know how real this shit is. Never changed. Americans will lie, cheat, and steal. And I'm putting myself in the category too, because this is just the American mentality. This is just how we operate, because we are the ones that's signing up to go to war. So the blame is on us as well. I can't just blame the government when we sign our bodies up. When we decide to shoot and kill others who have done nothing to us, we become a part of the problem, and that's exactly what we're doing. So you can say Biden all we want, but everybody who was a part of the military did so willingly. They signed up because they wanted to be there. So they're going to follow orders. So it's really the American people, the American citizens, that's causing this karma, this kickback, this chain reaction that we're seeing on our own lands. And this is not happening nowhere else. That's how we know this is directly related to our karma, because we do not see this happening nowhere else. We don't see other places where school shootings are happening that's leaving 21 people dead. We're not seeing people trying to be smuggled across the border and end up dead inside of trucks because they're too hot. We're not seeing these things play out in other places because they're not playing out in other places because they are not connected to the karma that we have created. So we're going to continue to see more craziness in the world because of the karma that we created. The clip off is activated, in other words, because we did it. We activated the clip off on Earth. And every time the clip off is activated on Earth, it's some crazy shit that happened. Just look at World War I, look at World War II. In World War II, we were dealing with Hitler. Hitler, you can say, brought forth the clip off of that time. They said, we got to stop this motherfucker at all costs. Now the modern day Hitler, you can say it's Putin. They put those same energies on Putin because Putin literally said the only reason he is going into Ukraine to do what he's doing is to denazify Ukraine. So Putin is calling Ukraine a Nazi territory, which is very confusing to the people if they don't understand what he's saying. Like Nazi, like, because President Zelensky, who was the president of Ukraine, he is a Jew. He is a Jewish man. So this, you see, they're playing so many wicked games. So Putin is saying that he needs to denazify Ukraine, but the president of Ukraine is a Jewish man who is supposed to be opposite of a Nazi. So what is this idea of denazification of Ukraine if the leader is a Jewish man? You see how that causes so much confusion. They call it the fog of war. This is called the fog of war, where nobody really understands what's truly going on. We don't even know what news or what media is real and what media is not. We don't know what stories are real and we don't know what stories are fabrications to get people emotionally excited about shit. So now we begin to tear up our own cities, which is what we're seeing. So not only are we dealing with the Roe versus Wade and women not having access to abortion, now we're dealing with inflation, and now we're dealing with the possibility of World War III because we don't know how to keep our hands to ourselves. We don't know how to not be a bully. We just need to fucking terrorize. And basically we're trying to rule out of fear. That's what's going on. NATO is trying to punk Putin, and Putin is not going for it. That's all. America is just trying to be the big bully because that's the reputation that America has developed. But we're going to learn that the cycles are changing. That's what we're going to learn. We're going to learn that you can't bully this planet into doing what you want to do. It has worked. It may have worked in the 20th century after World War II, because that's when NATO was created. NATO was created after World War II. That's when it was first started. Right around the time Joe Biden was born. I think it's like a 7-year difference between NATO being created and Joe Biden being born. So there's no coincidence that Joe Biden is all about NATO, where you see where Trump didn't really give a fuck about NATO. But why does Joe Biden have this fixation on NATO? Because he literally was born within 7 years of the creation of NATO. I had to do my own research to figure that out. That ain't something that I heard from nobody else. I did my own research. I looked at his date of birth and I looked at the date of birth of NATO, and I realized, it's less than 10 years. That means he was born and this energy was being created when he was born. So now that he's the president and he's in power, now he's pushing what he's always been a part of. You can say Joe Biden has always been a part of NATO. It's literally connected to his destiny because of the time he was born. So that's just an astrologer in me that did that type of research. That's just an astrologer. I'm like, I'm looking at these dates. I'm like, I see what's going on. So when I do things like that, I'm like, that's why he's pushing this agenda, because this is a part of his destiny. This is why he became president. This is why we had the kerfuffle in Afghanistan. That's why we left the way we left, because the true objective was Ukraine. So if we had the same energy that we have with Ukraine and Afghanistan, it would be a whole nother situation. But you see, we wasn't giving Afghanistan all that money. We left them people to be taken over by the Taliban. But we're not leaving the Ukrainian people to be taken over by Russia. So what's the difference? Why do we leave the Middle East and leave people to go back into the 6th or the 7th century? But we're with the Ukraine people, we're treating them like holy angels. Like, we just need to. There's no way Ukraine is going to fall. Like, we're treating these people like holy angels. Why did we not have that same energy with the people in the Middle East that chose to help us? So I'm not talking about the people that was on the side of the Taliban. I'm talking about the people that were on the side of the West, that were on the side of America, that got left over there to be slaughtered because we didn't help them get back home. So we made that happen in Afghanistan. We left terribly. But we about to defend Ukraine. We about to damn near go to World War III with because of Ukraine. But then we just fumbled the ball with Afghanistan. Why? Because we truly see this is where America's interest is. Our interest is in Ukraine. Not because we actually care about Ukraine, it's because Ukraine is on the borders of Russia. If we can set up a stronghold in Ukraine, we can better attack Russia. This is what it's all about. That's why Russia is doing what it's doing. Like, yo, you're not about to set up no NATO base in Ukraine, which is right on the borders of Russia, so that anytime y'all want to attack us, all y'all gotta do is go through Ukraine. You literally have a foothold in Ukraine, and that's exactly what's going on. So that we have a foothold in Ukraine, so when Russia gets out of line, according to what we wanted to do, now Ukraine has access to American weaponry. That's why we're sending so much money. We sent, what, $40 billion to Ukraine? We about to send them some more money. We about to send Ukraine more money, and we just sent them $40 billion. But again, we wasn't sending that type of money to all right. So anyway, I think I'm gonna go ahead and end this now, because now I'm seeing there's some technical issues occurring, but I'm like, oh yeah, I know what the fuck I'm saying. So now they're trying to mess up the internet connection here. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this. I think y'all get the point here. Yeah, I see what's good. See, they fucking with the shit because of what I'm saying. So it is what it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this, and I'll get back at y'all very soon. 93.